So I'd now like to introduce our last conference session of the day, a panel discussion sponsored by BASF, our friends at BASF, called Taking Care of Business Advocating for Agriculture. So I'm going to introduce our lead and our moderator for this session. There she is, approaching. And then she's going to go ahead and introduce the panelists. So I'll leave the hard part to you, okay, Tabetha? Perfect. So Tabetha Boot is Head of Communications and Industry Relations at BASF Canada Agricultural Solutions. A recent client survey revealed farmers not only want support in the fields, but also a greater voice and platform to advocate for Canada's agricultural industry. Tabetha is here to talk about how that survey was a catalyst to a company-wide commitment to agricultural advocacy, or advocacy as they call it, I think. Tabetha will be joined by Tyler Heppell, known affectionately as Potato Ty, and Ashley Bruner, Research Manager for the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. I'll leave Tabetha to introduce the panelists a little bit further and herself. And please put your hands together to welcome Tabetha to the stage.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here and to spend this last hour with you before standing in your way of the rest of the evening and some excitement and some conversation, but to maybe help fuel some of those conversations. I'm just going to go through a little bit of what I'm going to go through. I'm going to have about 20 minutes of information and some slide sharing, and then I'm going to invite the panel up for about half an hour of questions and conversations. I think we'll have the Slido going so that if you have questions in the audience, you're more than welcome to submit some questions, and we'll take those live. But again, so Tabetha with BASF, I'm the Head of Communications and Industry Relations, and we're going to dig into this topic of advocacy. This is a photo that I took in the grocery store earlier this year, and as you can see, there's a little sign on it that says, "No evil pesticides." So one of the things that I think we need to acknowledge is that ag has never faced a more complex set of challenges, right? There's a lot of misinformation out there, disinformation. People really don't know where their food comes from, and that causes a problem for not only farmers, but further down the line, consumers and the public alike. They just perhaps have trouble piecing those dots together. And so what I also want to share, and I think what we can acknowledge, is that we have more opportunities than we ever have had before through advocacy, through coming together and helping share our story a little bit more with the public so that we can build that social trust and the public trust and social license so that we don't get into challenges with that come down the line in terms of policy changes that may perhaps not be what we need. So why am I here? It's a good question. With BASF, one of the things we do is we listen to our customers. We ask a survey every single year, and we ask a whole bunch of different topics. And starting 2 years ago, one of the questions that we asked is, how important is it for a crop input company like BASF to advocate on your behalf, to advocate for the industry? And I think one of the things that perhaps surprised us a little bit is how high that ranked in importance amongst our customers, as well as how dissatisfied they were with us and the role that we were doing at that time. So we've been committed to stepping up and joining the conversation and having a voice to support farmers and advocacy in Canada. So one of the things that we wanted to explore a little bit more, we heard from our customers, but we wanted to go to a little bit of a broader audience and listen to more Canadian farmers. So I don't know if people saw this, but we had the opportunity to participate in the Western Producer 100 Farmers, 100 Questions, 100 Years survey. Through that survey, we sponsored 10 questions that were asked under the theme of advocacy. There were a whole bunch of different themes that were asked, actually 10 different themes. And one of the things that surprised the editorial team at the Western Producer was how high advocacy, out of all 10 of those topics, how high advocacy ranked in terms of importance to Canadian farmers. A couple of other pieces that we asked was thinking about, how a crop input company like BASF and seed companies could serve as an advocate for farmers. Which of the following comes to mind? And apologies, this is very small, but it is all available online. There's a ranking, and what is in the orange box is essentially, I can read it out here, influencing public opinion on the economic value, safety, and sustainability of agriculture, and then also influencing public policy and government regulations on crop protection and seed products. So right into that space of advocacy. The next question that we asked within that Western producer piece, and my little clicker isn't working. There we go. What are some of the concerns that people have that directly impact farming? And so again, a whole bunch of things popped up, but in the orange boxes, public opinion on environmental impact on public farming, public environmental impact on farming, then public opinion on food safety was down there, as well as public opinion on the cost of food. So we can tell what farmers are thinking as some of the issues, and I'd be curious for the farmers in the room, does this resonate with you? Are there other things on your mind in terms of challenges that you see or face on in aggregate? And then the final piece that we asked, I shouldn't say final, but the final piece in this presentation was about what farmers thought the important messages were to deliver to the Canadian public. And so we have a whole bunch of things here, but top of the list is agriculture's contribution to the Canadian economy, how food is grown, and where it comes from and how it gets to the dinner plate, sustainability of farming practices, food safety. You can see all these things. So again, an opportunity for farmers to reiterate what are the top issues and what are some of the messages that they think the Canadian public needs to hear. Now we want to flip the switch a little bit and look at what's the Canadian consumer's perspective. And so one of the colleagues that will join me on the stage in a moment, Ashley, works with the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity, and for a number of years now they have done public trust research reports. So every single year they go out and they ask Canadians a whole bunch of different questions. You can download a free version of the report online, and we're going to dig into some of the insights that came up and were announced just in October this year. So one of the main benchmark questions is asking, do you think the Canadian agri-food system is going in the right or the wrong direction, or you're not sure? And as you can see here, 31% think it's in the right direction, but there's actually 29% of the Canadian public that thinks it's going in the wrong direction, which is obviously not great. We'd like to make some improvements here. But one of the nuances that you can see, if you can see these very small numbers, is that we're not, over the past 10 years, not really making good headway in improving the situation. And so we're a little bit of a stalemate and need to kind of figure out, what can we do to move the dial in a more meaningful way. One of the other questions that's asked is about, what are considering the concerns, what are some of the top concerns within the agri-food space, or what are the issues? As you can see, very top of the list is the affordability of healthy food compared to a year ago. So cost of food, radiates as kind of the number one thing that Canadians think about. But then further down, the interesting thing is that the second biggest is food fraud, or the practice of mislabeling, altering, counterfeiting public food products, which is interesting that that's like the second thing that Canadians are concerned about. But then it comes into misleading food labels or descriptions for the purpose of marketing. I think we kind of saw that on the very first photo slide I was sharing. Use of pesticides in crop protection or production, misinformation, use of hormones in farm animals. Anyway, there's a list here, and you can see that Canadians have a variety of concerns, and so we're looking to unpack that a little bit more. Oh, and I did have little clickers, and I forgot to star them. One of the aspects that BASF was keen to understand, so we are a partner with CCFI and we support their research project, and because of that we get to ask a specific question. And so what we did is we put this last question in about, without plant science innovation, food prices would increase $4,500 annually for the average Canadian household, which is a true fact, by the way. But we framed it we asked the CCFI to frame it into, do you agree with this, or does this message resonate with you? And you can see only 6% say they strongly agree, and 14% are kind of in that, okay, maybe. But there's a lot of people that are, just don't have, didn't agree or disagree, like they just didn't really know what to make of that, which is interesting. So looking at the public's opinion and this need that farmers and the industry have to kind of bridge that gap, I'm going to switch now into the topic of coalition building and shifting opinions. So I want to acknowledge there's a massive landscape in Canada that is working on supporting the ag industry on this advocacy front. There's a number of associations that we're members of and support, and groups, not-for-profit groups that have this as part of their mandate. And one of the things that BASF has done as we look to say, how can we contribute? We want to make sure that we're acknowledging those efforts and not splintering them with how we join this conversation or how we engage. And so looking at the research, we know there's a need to help and advocate for the industry. We know Canadians have a concern, but one of the things that we don't quite fully understand, and where there's an opportunity for us to better understand, is that what information which Canadians would like to know that will help alleviate their concerns or build that public trust. I'm going to just pause for a moment and introduce this concept of audience segmentation, because it'll help bridge to the next section. In communications, when we're looking to build affinity and protect a brand, we often think of audience segments in this form of, we've got detractors, people that do not like us. We've got this like mushy middle, or this undecided, and they're the mushy middle. They don't know. They don't really care. And then we have promoters, and those are our people that really like our brand. They like what we do, and they promote us. And one of the goals in communications is, obviously we want to make sure that the promoters stay promoters, and where possible, use them as allies to help bring people on that side of the mushy middle into the promoter category. And in the same sense, with the detractors, obviously we don't want to, peeve them off anymore, but we also don't want them to bring people on this side of the mushy middle in with them to build the base of detractors. So just a briefer on audience segmentation to get us to this next place, where we have this paradigm of level of support as well as level of engagement. And so people can kind of be placed within this chart. And if we look at the detractors, there's a messaging opportunity that we can hopefully move the detractors based on either engaging with them in a way that they would like, or even maybe not engaging with them to not aggravate them even further, to move them to maybe a little less engaged, a little less active on social, and hopefully a little bit more less opposed, if that's not too many negatives. Same thing on the slightly less opposed, but still lower engaged. These are the detractors that aren't as active, perhaps on social, but at their core, and perhaps at like the family dinner table or Thanksgiving, they wouldn't express an opinion that would be more on a negative side of where we would want them. There would be an opportunity to increase their engagement and perhaps bring them over to a little bit more supportive. The other one is obviously low engagement, but support, and the goal there would be like, hey, you support us, but you're really low engaged. How we boost you up to become more engaged. And then finally, the people who really like us, are supportive, and are highly engaged, how do we encourage them to be even more engaged to join our mission? All right, so this is kind of one of the fun nuggets that we'll dig into with the panel discussion, but very preliminary research findings. So what we wanted to do, as I said at BASF, is to go out and do a survey to better understand which Canadians need to hear which message to help become more positive towards agriculture. So I have very in there because it is very preliminary research. I was sharing with my co-panels this very high-level information came in on Monday, so very fresh, and the research is still in the field, and so I'll say this is all very top-line data. We don't have enough yet to dig into subset information, so just keep that in mind as we go through the next couple of slides. So one of the questions we asked is, if you heard that a farmer was doing the following, would you generally have a positive or negative reaction, or would you feel that strongly about it? So on the positive side of things, 71% kind of put that into that positive category of using innovative agricultural techniques. We won't get into what that is specifically, but they liked the way that was framed. They also liked growing organic food. They also liked the idea of using data and technology to inform their decisions. They liked the concept of using digital tools, and they liked the concept of using crop protection. Now, interestingly enough, on the less so exciting side, they didn't like as much this growing hybrid crops. Same thing with herbicides, fungicides, and pesticides. So, very top-line insights that we're looking at right now. One of the nuggets, words matter, right? Like, what's the difference between crop protection and fungicide? Nothing. But people have a very different reaction. So the next question we asked is a little bit more descriptive. So we said pesticides is the umbrella term typically used when talking about herbicides, which we explained kills weeds, insecticides, killing insects, and fungicides. I can read, I promise. Fungicides, killing or preventing fungi and their spores. And so thinking about pesticides on farms, do you agree or disagree with each of the following statements? And we gave a few, and you'll note I have this category of before receiving information. So this is the first section that we asked, and so responses, 67% liked the idea of like, hey, I'm fine with pesticides being used on farm if scientists say it's safe. 58%, so that was the best response message. The next 58%, pesticides are necessary on farms to ensure quality food and quantity. So more than half liked that. 45 said, I'm fine with pesticides being used on farms if it means lower food costs. And then finally at 38, farmers should never use pesticides. So after receiving some information, we noticed a little bit of a change. I don't know why scientists went down. We have to dig into this a little bit more. But for some reason, after receiving some information, they weren't as favorable towards this. Pesticides are okay if scientists say they're safe. But we did see some positive direction, plus 6 points, on the statement of pesticides are necessary on farm to ensure food quality and quantity. So that's good. Another bump, 7% increase in I'm fine with pesticides being used on farms if it means lower food costs. And then the -4 is actually a good -4 because it meant it was a lower number of people saying farmers should never use pesticides. So what were the messages that shifted these opinions? The first one was 68% saying very strongly or strongly, by preventing disease and crop failure, pesticides ensure that Canada has a stable, reliable, and sufficient food system. That was the message people liked in aggregate the most. Then at 65%, pesticides undergo years of research and development and need to be approved by governments before they're approved for sale and use. They like that. 63% said that they like the message pesticides stop harmful organisms from harming crops. And then 61 came in with pesticides prevent food crops from being damaged, reducing food waste. A nice tie into yesterday's tour. 60% then also said that pesticides, or they liked, pesticides help ensure we can grow enough food to keep Canada, or to feed Canada's growing population. And so, some interesting insights that are just kind of the tip of the iceberg of what we're unpacking with the research that came in. The other component of the research that we did looked at who was delivering the message. And so you can see here there's a couple of ads, it's the same image, and two different messages. And so, hey, I'm Jim, I'm a proud Canadian farmer, and I produce healthy food while balancing environmental protection and societal needs. That's message number one. Message number two, hey, I'm Jim, and as a Canadian farmer, I believe sustainable agriculture balances economic, environmental, and societal needs, because you can't be green if you're in the red, a common term that we've used in the industry. And so when you take that to this audience, we asked them, does this message feel believable? And we had 73% liking message one and 78% liking message two. Then we asked them to say, do you feel like you can trust the person delivering this message? And for whatever reason, they felt like they could trust message one more. The next question is, the message makes me feel that Canadian farmers are good stewards of the environment. So a little bit of a shift here with which one resonated with them more. And then finally, the last question was, if I saw this online, I would click on it to find more. And you can tell there's one that people liked a little bit better than the other in terms of leading them into to find out a little bit more. So the other piece that we did was that we tested the same message with a different person delivering. So we wanted to go with a Canadian farmer. The second person is somebody that works in the ag industry. So in this example, it's just somebody that works in the ag supporting Canadian farmers. And then the final messenger was a scientist. And so as you can see here, same questions, is it believable? Can you trust this person? Makes me feel that Canadian farmers are good stewards of the environment, and if I saw this, I would click on it to learn more. You can see there's quite a spectrum of difference, and I think by looking at these insights, you're like, you know what, there's some opportunity to tease out, what should we say to which audience, and from whom should the message come from? And so with that, I'm going to pause, and I'm going to bring up my fellow panelists, because we're going to have a little bit of a discussion now of what we've just heard, and offer some conversation and get your input and questions as well. So under this guise of advocacy belongs to all of us, we've got Ashley and Tyler, and I actually am going to bring up Brenna too. So she's our surprise guest. Brenna is brand new with BASF. She's running our government relations as of last Tuesday, so fresh on the job. That's why she's not on the agenda. But as part of our commitment to being better advocates within agriculture, we've hired a GR person. Yay. Is this on? Okay, perfect. Amazing. Well, I did a very bad job of introducing, so maybe what I'll do is turn the mic over to each of you to say hello and who you are and why you're here, aside from the fact that I asked you to be here.
Well, I guess I'll go first since I'm right beside you. Hi, I'm Brenna Mahoney. As Tabetha said, I did just start with BASF last Tuesday, so I'm fresh. So really appreciate being here with everyone today. My background, I was previously at Keystone Agricultural Producers in Winnipeg, and that's a lobby association representing all farmers in the province. So this is very fresh to me. It's something I'm very passionate about. And one thing to note is my background isn't in agriculture, but I love this business. I have found myself in this business, and I'm so grateful for the passionate people that we work with. So I think, when we talk about advocacy, we're all advocates, and it really is going to be, and that's why I love the biggest job on earth, the BASF campaign that Tabetha just talked about, is that we're all a part of that. So really excited to hear from everybody else today and how we all work together to to get our message out as an industry.
Awesome. My name is Tyler Heppell. I'm a fifth-generation potato farmer from Cloverdale, BC, and I actually returned to the family farm 3 years ago after leaving for over 10 years and saying I was never going to come back. But I was in sales for 5 years, and I really enjoyed connecting with people and sharing really what I was passionate about. So when I came back to the farm and started posting about saving some farmland, I got some followers and just really started posting about my love for agriculture and day-to-day. And now I'm fortunate enough to post videos about 4 times a week about my journey through agriculture. And I don't know why people keep watching, but they do. So I'm happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Ashley at the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. We're a national nonprofit that works to grow public trust in the food system. So we're objective, we don't advocate for one group or another, but we really try to elevate that conversation to raise all tides, you know? I don't have a background in agriculture. I'm an English and political science major with a public policy degree. So I've always been interested in people, what they think, how that impacts what they do and what they talk about to other people and the influence they have. So that's what led me to CCFI, and I head the public opinion research every year. So we ask people what they think, and we let you guys know what that is. But I do have a background in advocacy, I think. I was thinking about it. My earliest memories are eating Timbits around a burn barrel, protesting with my dad, who was a union negotiator at a GM plant. So I understand that if you care about something, no one's going to pick up that fight except for you. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much again for joining. I'll kick it off with a few questions. We do have the QR code, so I don't know if we want to go to that screen. Super keen if people do have questions. Obviously, we'll take those, but we'll keep the conversation going with a few that I've come up with. So Ashley, I'll start with you. So I had a couple of very quick slides about the public trust research, and I just wanted to hear, did you have any additional insights from this year's research findings that you found particularly interesting or nuanced that you wanted to share with the audience?
I did, and kind of 3 broad findings of our research this year. The first one I would say is that indifference is a public trust risk. I think in the past we've had that mushy middle to be a majority of Canadians, about 50–60% was kind of neutral on most of our questions. But across the board, we're seeing increasing polarization to the wrong end, so more and more people feeling negative. So it's no longer enough to just hope our message gets out, but know that there's kind of that passive acceptance and at the very least not detractors. So that's the big thing, that indifference, that passivity, it's the wrong side is getting to that group, and we need to work on that. Number 2 is the need for improved collaboration, like you said. So the data has plateaued, gotten worse, what we're doing isn't working. So now's the time to think big, try new things. This is a great event, kind of bringing people together to discuss those big things. So more collaboration, but it's also a challenge, which I know we'll get into. And last, we're the most trusted industry in Canada. So we asked Canadians how trusting they are of 13 major industries in Canada. We outranked education, we outranked healthcare, not by a lot, but by a little. So we're the most trusted out of 13 major industries, but that invites scrutiny, that invites in high expectations. So even though we're the most trusted, we're also kind of the most questioned.
And there's opportunity to still inform, because there's lots of, well, we're trusted, there's still misinformation and disinformation that could, be a potentially slippery slope. So I think we've done the first question that came up of looking at those who believe the system is going in the wrong direction. How does this compare to other industries? So that's good. I'm going to ask a question that builds on something you said, Ashley, about collaboration. This one's for you, Ty, before we come to the rest that are up here. On the theme of collaboration and the need to support the industry. Obviously, you're doing a great job. You're an example of somebody who sticks their hand up and shares. What has your experience been, and do you have any advice for people that perhaps want to get into this space or want to dabble in the advocacy space a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone has a role in advocacy. Not everyone needs to be on social media, but I think if you have a farm, and you need to be doing farm tours. And I think maybe Ashley will speak to this as well, but it's really the younger generation right now that is seeing a disconnect from the farm. I think the older generation, you've grown up around farmers, and you've probably been on a farm before where, our farm does about 4 field trips a year. That's the max we can do because it's always during busy time. But the amount of kids that leave that go, I never knew that, potatoes didn't just, that potatoes grew in the ground, right? Like they didn't just show up in the grocery store is quite crazy. So I think if you're in this industry in Canada, you do have a part, and it doesn't need to be creating videos, although I think a lot more people do need to be posting online because there's a massive need right now. People want to feel connected to their food more than ever, and there's so much information out there that we need to make sure that part of that is how our food's grown. And I think we're in such a cool industry here in Canada where, we were talking about this before, we grow some of the safest food in the world. Like the public hates the idea of chemicals on our food, but basically our food grown here is what would be almost organic in the States. Like the amount of chemicals that they use that we can't use on our potatoes is crazy. So we do have some of the safest food here, and we need to get that message out.
Awesome. So let's maybe go to one of the audience questions is where the gym message is the one used in the questionnaire. Sorry, I don't know if I'm understanding there. Were the pics in the gym message the one used in the questionnaire? So yes, those were the real images. The center one could lead the public to think that the scientists experiment on plants. Yeah, so very valid comment. The nuance with that study is that it was a small group of people, and then what we'll do is we'll take that information and, if applicable, if you wanted to advertise, one of the things that you can do is A/B test images to see what people respond to better, and drop off the images that people don't respond to and boost the images that people do respond to. So a great call out, and that's part of the nuances of being able to use digital mediums to help connect the messages that resonate with the right people. So what I cannot read. Okay, clearly this is a long day. To what extent does misinformation affect public trust in the food system? So maybe Ashley, can you speak to that? And so misinformation, how prevalent is that, and how much of a disruptor is it?
I fear it's only getting worse, and I've been thinking about what is it? What's the heart of it? I call it fear-mongering, like fear-based, and when I look at our data and think about it, I think it is that safety message, that kind of that misinformation, calling food poison, toxic, your oatmeal's gonna kill you, that people are questioning the safety of their food when we never have before. I think that food safety piece in Canada has always been table stakes and taken for granted. And now the volume of misinformation specific to food safety and making people question, is this even healthy for me, my salad? I wish it wasn't healthy for me, but it is. So it's that safety piece, I think, that is really eroding trust. We did a key driver analysis on what drives trust, and food safety is the number one. So that was a few years ago when we thought, okay, everyone knows our food is safe, but I think increasingly the misinformation and categorizing food as evil, good, bad, is really kind of eroding the safety message.
You want to build on that?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here because I love this so much. I used to be the chair of the Healthy Grains Institute. It's an organization that no longer exists. I don't know, Ashley, if you're familiar with it at all. And some of the messaging that we as an industry first came out with was, and it was literally a commercial that said, consumers, don't trust yourself when it comes to your health. Trust your dietitian, trust your doctor, because it was just that on that safety side and who to trust for information, it really came down to who we know are the technical people. But in turn, we were telling consumers not to trust themselves. And what's interesting is we talk about the apathy. Like, we see apathy everywhere, every industry. And within that mushy middle, I know there's a question coming up here on that. Most people aren't paying attention. Like, we're in deep, you guys. Like, we're obsessed. I go to family dinners and my parents go, like, you're in this way too deep. Like, we're not thinking of this. So the majority of people aren't thinking about, food safety. This is table stakes for them. The majority of people are just like, well, it's on the shelf, it's safe, it comes from Mr. Safeway, and it just arrives. The potatoes just arrive in the bag, and they're great. But that risk that we're constantly in is that it only takes one documentary, it only takes one lunch with friends. I have family members and friends that, they're like, oh, I watched Cowspiracy, and, I'm not comfortable eating meat anymore. And that's actually coming back to the question that you had for Tyler, is about how do we now deal with this? As someone who's like overly passionate about agriculture, as many of you in the audience can attest to, we get in really deep, really fast with people. You don't have to be online. It can just be at your dinner table or at the grocery store, having those confident conversations without reacting to build that trust with folks. It's fascinating to me. It's not only a domestic issue, it's a global issue. We export the most of what we grow. And our global customer, I used to work for Cereals Canada, and we would host these international customers and bring them out to a farm. And these are people who, are just, Canada has great product, but did have the same questions as our consumers here about product. The increase in trust was huge. They became advocates of their own teams, of their own organizations, of their own families, just by having that experience on farm. There's most people in our lives who have never even been to a farm. There's even people who come from farm families who have not been to a farm, even if they're just one generation removed. So I think it comes down to, yes, that trust and that is always wavering, and is always at risk. But most people aren't paying attention until they do. So who's going to be at the ready to catch them? And that's where it comes to, like, each one of us here has that network and has that opportunity to have those conversations with the knowledge we have.
I think really quickly, just to add some context to that, like a personal story. It was about a year ago. I was walking by some potatoes, and the potatoes were really dirty, and we were spraying water on it. And so I took a video of it and didn't think much of it, and I made a satire video saying, today we are spray painting our potatoes red. We do this because they sell for more money, follow from our farming hacks. And it was very obviously water that was getting sprayed on the potatoes, but it did kind of look like, the potatoes were turning red from that dark brown to red. And the video went absolutely viral. It got over 100 million views across all platforms. And it got to the point where I had a friend tell me that he was shopping with his mother, and his mother went over to one of the potatoes and was trying to scrape off the red paint on it. And, it was just a satire video, but it just goes to show, people will believe anything on the internet.
That's amazing. Okay. So we have a couple of questions that have got a couple of thumbs up. So we'll start with the top one. Are you concerned about how Bill C-59, the anti-greenwashing, may impact the ability for agriculture and food to share our story with Canadians? Who wants to tackle that one?
I can jump in here. I think what's interesting, and I'm gonna lightly graze over this. This is where I think Stan said it earlier. Policy matters. So I'm going to answer this in an indirect way, and then I'll get to it. So it actually ties in with the last question. There used to be a bill of Advertising Food to Kids Act. I can't remember what the bill number is. But it would have labeled bread for children as unhealthy. So it has to do with the sodium content, right? And everyone around the Cereals Canada table was looking at one another and said, what do we do with this? How can we put bread on a shelf with a label on it that says it's unhealthy? And not healthy for children. And then, like, what's the barrier in that reality? So I think when we look at the history of where these, policy drivers come from, and something like C-59, it's, we have a responsibility of an industry to put out correct, accurate information and promote the good things that we do. And we do that really effectively, and we have many examples of that. I think we're a really creative industry. I think that we're very solutions-oriented, and something that I consistently tell when I worked at CAP and working with farmers, they feel very overwhelmed, and it's like a personal attack on them and who they are foundationally as a person when they see things like this. They feel like what I'm doing is not enough, and it will never be enough, and this comes into the whole mental health sphere of how difficult it can be. And it's like agriculture is the solution. is the most powerful message that we can lead with. Like, when we look at individual businesses and brands and, you know, the individual commodities that we're trying to promote, consumers don't think in commodities. They think in ingredients and meals. And I think if we can celebrate food with them, which we do really well, if we can talk about agriculture is actually a solution, understand, what do you care about? You care about the environment? So do I. You care about food security? I absolutely do. And everything I do in my business is to make sure that you have all of those things. You care about food safety. I participate as an egg farmer in an extensive, I'm not an egg farmer, but I'm just saying as an example, in a very robust system to make sure that what you are getting in that egg carton every single day is the best quality in the world. So I think that we can manage this, but that risk of bad policy is always there. That's where that collaboration, working together, finding a single message, and recognizing it can't just be on the farmer sharing their story. It has to take people like me. I take it very seriously that I also need to be at the table having those conversations.
I'll jump in a bit too. We hosted a webinar a few weeks ago with a couple lawyers and comms folks about Bill C-59, and I think I learned two things. One, kind of, this bill wasn't even, the impetus wasn't agriculture and food. It was another industry making false claims. So I think that shows how we're kind of the babies in the bathwater sometimes with regulations, with people not thinking, oh, how does this affect food or agriculture? So we kind of get the impacts in that way, and we need to kind of elevate our status in the world for that reason. And secondly, when it comes to sustainability and green labels, consumers don't believe them anyways. So the panelists recommended, don't put a label, don't put a green label, tell your story. Say, we care about the environment, here's how. You don't need a green label to tell that story.
Thanks. So 4 thumbs up to, is there an agriculture topic that deserves more attention, which no one wants to bring up? So maybe Ty, I'll toss this to you from the aspect of nobody wants to bring up. Has there been something that you've posted or if you found that has elicited like negative reaction that might fit into this category of like, ooh, that's a scary one to touch, I don't want to bring that one up, maybe as a lead into that question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always afraid to talk about chemicals. We're not an organic farm, but I don't really make many videos talking about our chemical use, not because I think it's unsafe, but just because it's such a lose-lose situation. People have such a hard mindset on where it is because of these documentaries that have come out. Like, I mean, Kiss the Ground is a good documentary, but you know, especially here in Canada, I've already said this, but our food is so safe here, and it's not harmful eating potatoes or vegetables that are grown with pesticides. But it's such a hard topic to talk about because people are very loud online about their organics and their hate for chemicals, and we saw that in the numbers, right? So I think that's one that people really don't want to touch, and I haven't seen many farmers touch it. If anyone out there wants to do that, good on you. But yeah, I've been avoiding that topic, and maybe it would be a good video to make here pretty soon.
And just to build on that, I mean, I think that's why we're doing some of this research to understand, you know, not coming at it from like, yeah, pesticides, but more from the standpoint of like, okay, if you knew this, does that help you feel more comfortable? And so kind of coming in from a more shared value or curiosity standpoint of what people would like to hear that helps them, yeah, feel better. So then could we be more proactive in counteracting these smear campaigns like Cowspiracy? I mean, I'll start and we can go, yeah, absolutely. I think part of this talk is speaking to that, like how as an industry can we be more proactive? And Tyler, you leaned in, so I'm going to go to you first.
I mean, I just, whenever there's a negative thing online, even about myself, I never respond to it because you always bring more attention to it as well. So I think you need to pick and choose what you respond to. If you do make a full campaign, like responding to this Cowspiracy thing, it does bring more attention to it as well and gives it legs. So I think sometimes the best response is no response at all, too.
Yeah, and I was going to say that that's a really good piece of advice from a very specific sort of topic, like for like a very specific instance. That's what I'm trying to say. And then speaking to the longer term game of that's why it's so important for each of us to chat with our social network and have those conversations openly when they're in that mushy middle and they're more easily persuaded to come into a proactive, positive mindset. All right, a couple more minutes. Do we have any leaders in this advocacy for ag group that have any extensive hands-on experience with agriculture?
I put my microphone up right away. I'm like, I can answer this.
Brenna.
I got this. I think what's interesting is when we look at the advocacy space for agriculture, it's mostly actually the producer associations who are leading that. And I think, now that I'm at BASF, we talk about our customer. Our customer is actually our farmers. And, we have this really great partnership with our producers and hearing what they want and what they need, and even the insights work that's been done to understand how do farmers feel and what are they looking for. That in the advocacy space is really where they're driving those conversations. So, I look at Keystone Ag Producers as just an example. Our president is a farmer who runs a very large, extensive farm, but we have people on the board who also have very small operations. It's a very diverse spectrum of opinions and ideas, and the board would work very closely together on figuring out, the policy perspectives and how to bring that forward to Ottawa. And that's just one organization, and there are many producer associations across Canada. But also part of that's actual lobby advocacy associations. But advocacy is taking place everywhere. Like Tyler is part of that. He's right on farm advocating for his business. Within each organization and within each business as well, whether it be a farm business or a corporation, or I even look at the Grain Commission. There are people that work full-time at the Grain Commission that are also farmers. So, they're at every level of the decision-making process who have not only on-farm, but are people like myself and Ashley who don't come from a farm, but actually spend our entire time and being, in essence, trying to understand this business more and bring in an outside perspective to help balance that. So this is why I love agriculture, is that it really takes many hands to make light work, and we have a big job ahead of us to answer these questions, but having that on-farm experience, we have that in droves.
I think, too, to add to that, we're why it's usually associations that are pushing for marketing is because in the past, there has been a lot of costs to that, right? So it's shared across the farmers, and we're now entering a new era, I believe post-COVID era, where a person who can make organic content and get millions of views can now outperform brands that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. So really only within the last 4 years have we entered a realm where the average farmer can now have an insanely loud voice for what they believe in without spending money. And I think that that's super powerful. And I mean, yesterday the BC Young Farmers put on a really good conference and had lots of great chats and panels. And I really am excited for the future of agriculture, but I think a big part of that is going to need to be social media, and it's going to be educating the end consumer. And I mean, part of my mission is showing the good, the bad, and the beautiful parts of farming, because people need to see the bad too. And I mean, a big issue too is the amount of the lack of new farmers we have coming into the industry. I think the stats are over 40% of farmers are going to be retiring in the next 10 years. That's a massive issue. So we're going to be needing more young farmers to be picking up the reins. And I think one of the best ways of doing that is educating. And I think, we're at an amazing opportunity right now where you can advertise for free, just organically.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, so a couple more minutes. Why do we rely on people like the food professor to always talk about ag in the media? Are there not other people that could speak on behalf of agriculture? Great question. Yes. I think part of it is a little bit of who puts their hand up as one piece of it, and I think that kind of speaks to one of the topics that we've been highlighting today, of this need to build a bit more of a coalition and have more voices join the conversation. I don't know if anybody wants to build on that.
I could just maybe add into, I think one thing I know about working with farmers is they're very humble people. And I think that's where in agriculture as a whole, because it's been so predominantly that producer, like on the farm, local focus, you know, they're like, what? Why would the media want to talk to me? Like, I'm just, you know, running a farm. So sometimes I think to get the right people at the right table to have those right conversations, I think we're still trying to figure out you know, what that looks like in a modern world where, you know, like Tyler said, it's, you know, the online presence has so much power. A lot of people are not comfortable with that. And so, you know, even being on CBC News at 6 o'clock for 30 seconds, other people aren't comfortable with that either. So I think that's where we've been left in this perplexing time where there's this demand and there's this curiosity. And we're all trying to figure out how to answer that in a way that obviously protects our freedom to operate, builds that trust and transparency, builds that understanding, but it is complex. I know there's a question down here about, you know, agricultural learning at a young age. Well, that's where, you know, agriculture in the classroom, and it's called something different in different provinces, but this is why this is such a big piece. Ag literacy, and I don't know the data on it, you're the data person, Ashley, but, you know, there is data directly tied to, if people know where their food comes from, and they have an understanding of the food system, that is like a precursor determinant of their long-term health and longevity. So it's not just about this is helpful for agriculture and we're just looking for a win for ag. This is about people. We're in the people business. We're in the relationship business. And sometimes we forget that. And, you know, just as not only government, but also as people who work in the industry, that this is really just about people, people's well-being, people's health, and farmers are a foundational piece in the products that they're producing, and agriculture as a system, we're supporting that long-term health and win.
Okay, awesome. Chipping through a couple more. Learning about agriculture should happen at a young age. As Brenna was just saying, what attempts have you made to reach the youth about agriculture? So I don't know who you is, but I'll put the you hat on for now for BASF. Some of the ways that we help support and engage youth in ag is through our sponsorship and partnership with 4-H, as well as Ag for Life in Alberta, which is the Alberta chapter of Ag in the Classroom, and having discussions about how can we support Ag in the Classroom from a national perspective more. And I don't know if anybody else wants, maybe Ty, I don't know if there's anything that you were mentioning, you do field trips or days, if you wanted to build on that at all.
Yeah, I think field trips is the main one there. There's also like programs like Spuds in a Tub that's really popular, where classrooms get to grow potatoes, which is super cool. And there's a massive wait list for that. So I think it's 200 classrooms on the wait list. So we sponsored one class. I think it was a few $100, but just stuff like that I think really gets the next generation excited about agriculture.
And so one of the other ones with 5 thumbs up, farms on the brink of collapse and need advocacy for direct support, change, ag insurance, ALC, climate, water, are these being advocated too? Brenna's moving.
Yeah, well, just because this is like fresh, like this is what I did every day. You know, I'm so grateful for my time at CAP and working with partners like BC Ag Producers as a great example for BC. You know, each province has a General Farm Lobby Association that are absolutely seized with these issues. The grassroots are speaking quite loudly, and I think that, you know, this is where the answers aren't clear. There isn't consensus on how to address everything, but there are common threads, and that's, you know, for the team at CAP and, you know, Canadian CFA, the Federation of Agriculture, BC Ag Producers. These are groups that are trying to find solutions that are fit for the farmers in each of their regions. And that regions matter. I always say, like, policy set in Geneva is going to look different in Minto, Manitoba, right? So, like, you know, we have to think about context of what works in one region is not going to work in a different region, and that's why these provincial groups are so important. But there also has to be that national understanding of the complexities of, you know, the funding sources, for example. So, you know, there's partnerships across Canada with each of the provinces with SCAP as just one example for that. But I understand the fear and I understand that question very well, because I get calls at midnight on my own personal phone, asking, what do I do? This is what I'm facing. But it is something that groups are absolutely seized with.
Thanks, Brenna. So I'm super cognizant of time. I know there are a number of questions here, but I do encourage people to chat through dinner and over the next, grab Ty if you want to know what social platforms to be on before he leaves the stage. I'll just wrap up with a couple of things to close us out. So, talking about advocacy and the commitment, one of the things that BASF is doing is we have a global advocacy campaign that's called Farming the Biggest Job on Earth. And that's a global commitment that we have to help support and amplify and raise the voices of farmers and highlight some of the topics that can help bridge and build that social license and public trust. We have a team of 600 plus employees in Canada, and part of that commitment is making sure that they are feeling like they are part of the conversation and part of that coalition supporting the industry. And as well, the commitment to help share with each of you one of the questions actually we didn't get to is this organic versus conventional, and what are some of the terms that we should be using. So the research that we're doing, that I gave a preview for, and that we'll have some more information on, will help be a bit of a guidepost. I know there are many hats that a farmer wears, and so being able to support with a little bit of insights of like, hey, if you're going to chat, lean into this message with this person, and hopefully that's helpful for you. So the research as it's packaged will become available, so please keep your eyes peeled for that. As I mentioned, we have this Biggest Job on Earth campaign. You can learn a little bit more online. The research findings coming soon, and I'll just leave with a bit of a video to hopefully get us all pumped about being advocates for our industry. You guys might have to press play.
What is possible? Possible is pride. It's potential and purpose. It's seeing the bigger picture. Possible is investing in innovation. Possible is sustaining farms and families. Possible is working together. Possible is protection. Protection of crops. Protection of livelihoods. Protection of the future. Protection of purpose. As the biggest job on Earth, farmers make things possible. Supported by BASF, strengthened by a coalition of advocates, and made possible by you. BASF, for the love of farming. The biggest job on Earth.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much to Brenna, Ty, and Ashley. We appreciate your being here and your comments and dialogue, and to all of you, thank you for listening and all of your questions.